Hi everyone, it's Dexter from A2K, and thanks for joining us for today's webinar, Tips for Maintaining a Healthy Revit Project. Technical consultant Letitia will be presenting for us today. Before we start, we'll just go through about A2K. We're all about fostering innovation through consulting and training. A2K Technologies plays a vital role in helping the infrastructure, building, mining, construction, architecture, and manufacturing industries reach full potential by delivering technology solutions and support services such as education and consulting. We work with visionaries to shape the future of design and in turn enable them through innovation to minimize risks, improve productivities, and achieve excellence. A2K Technologies is considered the business partner of choice and trusted advisor by vendors and clients. We partner with major software and hardware vendors to meet our clients' technology needs. We strive to exceed client expectations by identifying their challenges and delivering solutions through experience and innovation. We work with clients, companies of any size nationally and abroad. Over to you, Letitia.
Thank you, Dexter. Good morning, guys. Good morning, everyone that got the time to log into this webinar today. So I'm Letitia and I will be presenting the webinar today. So just a little bit about myself. I just completed 5 years working for A2K, and I'm one of the technical consultants within an architecture background, been dealing with implementations, troubleshooting, etc. So today's webinar, we're going to be covering about how we can mitigate issues within your Revit models. So pretty much through the years working as a technical consultant, and especially on support within A2K, helping clients, we've been noticing that I have started understanding how much time it's involved on troubleshooting files and sometimes being even not able to access those models. So this session is aiming to help users and managers minimize the issues with those files that can impact deliverables within entire teams. And hopefully that will minimize the troubleshooting steps. So as we all are aware, Revit will have multiple errors and behaviors which are commonly related to either performance issues, or sometimes you may have very slow files, and even sometimes you won't be able to open your models at all. So we're going to start this session today by giving 10 tips for end users that are working in Revit projects in regard to some best practices that we suggest our clients to minimize issues with those files. So as we work as collaboratively as a team in Revit projects, we also need to understand that we need to, as a team, try to prevent those issues. So first tip for the end user will be always access files through the Revit interface. So throughout the years, I've seen people always opening File Explorer through Windows and just double click on Revit files. Even though this is not a central file where you're required to create a new local copy, always go through the interface. Revit best practices suggest that we always open files through the Revit open dialog box. Within later versions of Revit, also central files can be accessed through the recent files, and will automatically create new local copies. But previous versions of Revit may require users to also create local copies every day. We're going to discuss that later on. Second tip will be review the warnings as they pop up. Don't let your files build up with those warnings until you have 1,000 warnings to deal with. Always, as they pop up, try to understand what they related to and what the impact that will have within your files. In that way, we're going to minimize issues and also save some time down the track on reviewing those warnings and not knowing what objects they related to, being need to search those warnings, etc. So Revit will also have a warnings button where everyone can double check warnings within those files as well. So just minimize the usage of groups and understand best practice. Groups in Revit are heavier than families. So avoid having multiple levels of nested groups within projects. Uh, Groups are known to lead to fatal errors when modifying multiple levels of nested groups. Uh, Also, avoid placing hosted objects without hosts, like doors and windows by themselves without the wall to host those objects. Groups also don't like to be mirrored, and also we try avoiding attached objects within groups. Uh, a large number of groups can impact the model performance, especially when they have like room separation lines, walls, and objects interacting with other groups or other geometry outside those groups. So instead of creating large groups, start investigating and consider linking those large groups or creating super families. Also keep an eye for arrays, as elements will badly affect the model performance. So when you ungrouping geometry, it is still not removing those groups from your project browser. So you may always need to purge them if they no longer required, or delete them, remove them all completely from your projects. Just ungrouping won't remove those groups from the projects. Avoid modeling in place. So modeling in place is a common practice, and we see that all the time. So modeling in place is pretty much recommended when you have a specific location and you need to deal maybe with a detail, but not really start modeling everything in place, especially within the interiors world. I've seen people modeling in place all the time. Modeling in place will not only be resided within the project where they are created. So in theory, the only way we can get those in-place models out of the specific project is by following workarounds. And as we all know, workarounds are never perfect. They are pretty much another method to troubleshoot problems because they, in theory, can't be placed within different projects. Also, when we copy model in place objects, it will always create multiple instances of the copied object. So it's not like a family where you load and then you modify the family itself and would update any copies within a project. Every time we copy a model in place, another family instance will be created under your project browser. Remove unnecessary design options. So always keep track and keep copies of the files that contains those design options, but design options, if they no longer required, they recommend it to be removed. The reason is design options, they duplicate geometry of the options. And sometimes we may end up with 1,000 different options in multiple geometry that is duplicated. So these negative impact the performance of those files. So always when you no longer require those design options, make sure you accept those primary options and remove unwanted ones as well. Then we're going to talk about raster images. So raster images, they are embedded within your project files and can slow load times sometimes. Also large raster images such as logos, even though when they are scaled down to fit into title blocks, they will still keeping the original file size. So consider the size of those images when we start importing or linking those images within your projects. Also, if they are like is enough to be created as a detail item family, consider creation of symbols, detail items, etc., instead of using images for those projects. This is a big one within Revit. So please, guys, do not import CAD files, and never, I will say a very, very strong word, never ever explode DWGs within Revit. DWG and Revit, they meant to be used as based files within Revit, not really as native geometry and line work. So DWGs are known to be the primary causes of increase within file size and reduce model performance. So minimize DWG links and imports when possible. Also, multiple companies will use also container files to host those DWGs, and then the container file will be then linked into their models. So consider alternative workflows and never ever explode those CAD files in Revit. Disabling volume computation within rooms. So especially within the architectural world, when we're talking about rooms, if those areas are not required to have, sorry guys, if those areas are not required to have volumes calculated, always choose to just have the areas, because there will be a quicker calculation within a room's geometry. So when we have areas and volumes calculated, the calculation tends to slow down those files as well. So some best practices within a work sharing environment. Two big ones: create new local copies every day. So always create a new local copy. Revit 2000 in 2021, if I'm not wrong, will automatically create new local copies if users are accessing files through the recent files page. Previous versions would not. So always as a best practice, create a new local copy. So you ensure that you have the latest and greatest information from those central files. Upon opening and accessing work shared models or central files, we also going to have an option under the open dialog box to specify work sets that require to be open, which means visible. So especially when you're working large files, consider closing a few of those work sets, and that will help you guys with performance upon accessing the file. It should be quicker to access those models if we have less geometry or less work sets visible or opened as well within the Revit interface. Work sharing, another one within work sharing. So guys, one of the biggest issues when we're working in a team environment is pretty much multiple users input with different levels of knowledge within Revit. So avoid undo commands after synchronizing or canceling the sync process. This is one of the biggest causes of corruptions within central files. So once you send the model to be synchronized, make sure you wait for that to finish and avoid undo stuff after you synchronize those files. I will also give some tips from a model management view. So more for those who are project leaders or team, your Revit gurus, etc. Some maintenance procedures to be followed. Audit files on a regular basis. So the audit functions within the open dialog box will scan and detect and also fix corruption within elements in a model. However, this won't provide feedback on which objects are fixed, but at least it should prevent corruption within models. So we recommend auditing files as a maintenance procedure within Revit models. Purge unnecessary data. So especially when you have multiple people adding their input into these files, always review the families that are imported, loaded, and try purging any information that is not necessary for the model. This not only prevents issues with the file, but also you will help on maintaining the size of the file as low as possible. So purging unnecessary data, usually we need to go through this task 3 times, expand the categories, and make sure you check the families that are not required. Be aware that when you purge data, it also purges standards from your templates, including view types, text styles, etc. So make sure you go through the list and just purge what's not required. Review those categories that are available. Remove unnecessary views from projects. So within Revit Project Browser, when we right-click at the very top, we have an option for browser organization, and by default, Revit should have an option to display views that are not on sheets. So this is a good way to filter your project browser to understand which views haven't been placed within your project deliverables and start removing those that are no longer required within your projects. Review downloaded families before loading them into your projects. This is a big one. I've seen people downloading families all the time and just loading into projects. So always review for shared parameters or parameters that are not required, purging out materials. Any materials that are applied to your families will go through to your projects. So sometimes you end up with 1,000 materials that you don't even have any clue where they come from. They may be just coming from some families. Purge families, remove unnecessary data before you take them and load them into your projects. And avoid, so as you start dealing more and more with families, build up your own library with the standard components you use often within projects, and keep those consistent to be used across your projects, and ensure all users utilize those reviewed families before they start searching and downloading from the internet. Also Revit backup. So don't forget to archive and store, regardless of the backups, important project milestones. So always recommended to save project milestones regardless of those backups. Revit backups are set by default to a number of 20 for central files, and project files a number of 5. Through the options, when you're saving a project, you can always change the maximum backup within those projects. It's the same option for central files or normal Revit models. They are known or shared. It's under the options within the Save As dialog box to specify a different number. Also, it's recommended to save project files under a different location than where you have your central files. So make sure your local files are saved within a different location to prevent users by mistake to access the central file instead of their local copies. Other important tips that I want to highlight at this stage. Revit updates are a big one. When you're working in a team environment, make sure everyone within your team has the same updates applied. Revit updates will not only fix bugs, but it will also update collaboration functionalities for those on BIM 360. It's always recommended that everyone in a team is using the same updates. Otherwise, especially when working in a work sharing environment, people will access models with different build versions with the Revit software. And the models it can lead to issues down the track. So always ensure that everyone has the proper updates applied. Clear out the temporary folder on a regular basis. So just go through your Windows temporary folder every week or so. Make this a regular maintenance procedure within your organization and ensure all the users will clear out those temporary files that will build up over time to prevent issues with the Revit files. Also check an empty recycle bin and ensure you have a minimum of 5 gigabytes of hard disk space available. When we working in the cloud, Revit, because the cloud work shared models will pretty much download copies of host plus links to the C drive within a collaboration cache folder by default. It's recommended that users that are working with the cloud have a minimum of 3 times the size of those files, including links within hard space available. When possible, also have recommended graphic cards and driver installed. Vendor Autodesk has a web page where users can check for recommended drivers and graphic cards. If the graphic card you're using is not recommended or doesn't have a driver that has been tested by Autodesk, ensure to go to the vendor website and download the latest updates from NVIDIA, etc. And just the last one would be separate work shared models from local copies location and just make clear when central files are central files. And that will take us towards the end of the session. So we will open the floor for any questions. Okay. So I'm just trying to get the chat. I'll get a Q&A session here. Okay, so I have a question here. When working BIM 360, what's the equivalent to creating a local model every day? So BIM 360 doesn't create a local copy every day. So BIM 360 doesn't require that option to be enabled because BIM 360 works in a way that you will pretty much download for the first time you access the BIM 360 file. You will automatically download a local copy on your collaboration cache folder. So BIM 360 does not require a new local copy every day, pretty much. And then after the first initial access to the model, BIM 360 will just find differences between your local cached model and the model that is available in a cloud, and we'll just find those different differences and load into your central new local copy next time you access that. In saying that, the collaboration cache folder is never a location where users will access unless troubleshooting in 360 files. Yeah. Is it okay to explode DWGs in a family editor and clean up the lines? This is a hard one. I would not suggest exploding those DWGs. There is a couple exceptions. I would try never explode it fully, so you can partially explode. You need to clean up not only lines, but line patterns as well, materials. So there are a couple locations that you may need to review if you're looking to explode those DWGs into the family editor. Is there a maximum file size recommendation or so you look at the size of your computer when GPU is being used? So Autodesk will have system requirements for Revit, and I would suggest reviewing the Autodesk article, because they will specify the minimum requirements for the computer itself. File sizes will pretty much vary drastically depending on the type of projects clients are doing. And I helped clients with massive files within large projects, over to a gigabyte and 2 gigabytes. But it's just like, also, it becomes too big, it starts getting hard for the end user to deal with that file. So that's why we try to keep those files as low as possible in size. But there are methods that we suggest clients, like we can start breaking down models into other separated files as an alternative, but usually it's the computer that it will be a recommendation from the Autodesk website. A lot of our topography is imported CAD files that are converted to the topography. Is this a problem? No. So when we linking surveys within Revit and we converting them to topography, it should be okay. Just review your line patterns and your line styles. That would be my take. In regards importing or linking CAD files, so I have another client, another user asking there, always link instead of importing. The difference is when you're importing a CAD file, that link becomes embedded within the Revit file. Linking CAD drawings should enable us to reload those links if required. So importing is always avoid importing, and always link CADs when possible. Okay, so I don't think we have any other questions. So guys, just feel free to reach out to us if you have any other questions in future, and then we're more than happy to assist you guys with any other questions you may have, or if you want to engage to have a further discussion as well. So you can also access A2K Technologies event page to check on upcoming webinars. And thank you for watching this webinar. I just came to have another question. Is load as group will take much of the size pile? It depends on what your group is. So loading a group, it's the same as if you create your group within the project and then you start dealing with it. So it depends on the complexity on that group. I don't see any issues using groups for small portions of the project, but when we're talking about like maybe floor plates within buildings, this is when I would be starting to be more cautious and probably linking those instead of using that as a group. Okay, guys, so that will take us towards the end of the session. Thank you very much for watching. Appreciate everyone's time for being here. Any other questions, please feel free to email info@a2ktechnologies.com.